Welcome back to Part-Time Bodybuilder. This is your host, Holly Jeans. I am joined today by Antonia. Hi, Antonia. How are you?
Hi, I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, really good, thank you. So I got Antonia on here because she has recently posted about her decision to stop competing, which we will get to in a little while. But I thought it'd be really good to start off with kind of your competing journey and how you started.
Yeah. So I started competing. I think my first show was when I was 19. But I've always been involved in sports. I've always been really, really competitive. So I was a competitive figure skater up until the age of 17. And when I was 17, I was a little bit lost on what to do. I suffered from an eating disorder in my early teens as well. So basically, from the age of like 12 to 17, my life was very much restricted with food and exercise. Even though I was weight restored, kind of mentally, I was using very much like skating and things to sort of lose weight and stay relatively lean. So it was kind of like a vicious cycle, I guess. And when I was 17, I kind of wanted to get into the gym and put weight on because I realized I basically wasn't really living a life. So I started putting weight on, and I kind of just saw people who'd competed and I thought it looked really, really fun. And for me, I need something to work towards. I said, like, I've always been competitive. I've always wanted to win things. So I figured I'd just throw myself in the deep end and do a show. And that was when I was 18. So literally fast forward like a couple of months later when I was 19, I did my first show and kind of just caught the bug from there. Yeah, so it was a bit like I did jump in very, very fast, and I probably should have waited a bit longer. But I was literally desperate just to do something. So that's sort of how I kind of got into it. Yeah.
And is there quite a lot of pressure placed on figure skaters? I can imagine there is, in terms of kind of how you appear.
Yes and no. It's not as bad as people think it's going to be. You do get like a massive range of sizes. In general, you tend to be smaller, not due to how people want to see you, but due to the fact that you have to basically throw yourself up in the air. And if you're smaller, it's a lot easier to do so. But I wouldn't say there's as much pressure as people think there would be. For me, it was mainly like just being a teenager, going to an all-girls grammar school and just feeling like wanting to be perfect in every way, shape and form, and putting too much pressure on myself to do that. But yeah.
And in terms of training, had you literally just got in the gym for a couple of months and decided to throw yourself into
Yeah, I was basically a full-time cardio bunny. Or I did like legs occasionally when I was like 15, 16, and it was like goblet squats, bodyweight squats, jump squats. That was about as far as it went. And then it was cardio. And even when I started, I was doing a lot of cardio. So yeah, I kind of started educating myself on weights when I was about 18. I think I'd been lifting probably about like 8 months when I competed, maybe just over. So it wasn't really long at all. So I signed up with Josh McHale, who was my coach at the time, in the January, and I did my first show in like the October. So that's sort of how long I was, I guess, taking it seriously. Like I'd done things before, but I don't think until you get a coach, you're sort of like, I was just like sort of like throwing things around and doing an arm day. So yeah.
It's amazing, isn't it? You don't realise how much you have to learn until you actually start doing it, and then it's like, whoa, okay, there's a lot more to this than I thought.
I know. I was doing my PT course at the time, so it kind of tied in. So I was learning a lot while I was like about personal training and about the gym, and then I was learning a lot through competing and what Josh was going to do. So it actually tied in really, really well together. But I think if it wasn't for him, or the PT course, either or, I'd probably be like way over my head and been like, no idea. I'd still be on the treadmill, put it that way.
Doing your arm day every now and again.
Yeah, exactly. I think it was like Monday arm day or something. I was like, for God's sake, never again.
Got your bro split going on.
It was. I literally started doing a full-on bro split. So I took advice of one of the guys who I knew from school who played rugby. So I literally like copied what he was doing to a T. Like, not a good idea. So yeah, no one do that.
And so you started in, what year did you say, 2018?
Yeah, 2018. Yeah, so I did my first show in 2018. I did two. So I did the West Midlands show, where I placed third. So I did juniors, and then I qualified for the British, which was 2 weeks later. So that was in the same month. So I did the British and came sixth in the juniors 2 weeks after that. That was with the UK BFF. So that was like my first year done and dusted. So it was literally done within like 2 weeks. And then like 2019 was when I came back for my second year with PCA. Yeah. And then obviously last year, so 20 oh my gosh, no, hold on. I never know what year it is. We're in 2020
It's
now.
2020 at the
That has really thrown me. No, so it must have been 2017, then 2018, then 2019, and then I stopped this past year. Yeah, so yeah, 2017, 2018, 2019.
And how did you find your first show? Were you kind of hooked straight away?
Yeah, honestly, like the whole, I think with skating, you get very much into like the tans, not tan, but like the sparkles and the dress and all that jazz. Hold on one sec. Do you want to take his lead? I have a very, very crazy dog. Hold on.
We've got a tiny little puppy.
Yeah, tiny little puppy who's currently being looked after by my partner, and I don't think he's playing ball.
He's like, I want to be in on the action.
He just likes attention. He's honestly an attention seeker and a half. But yeah, anyway, sorry, carrying on. How did I find my first show? Yeah, no, honestly, I caught the bug like instantly. Like backstage, the bikini, the hair, the makeup, all that jazz. And for me, like with skating, it's very much like you present yourself. And that's essentially what bodybuilding was. So for me, it's like almost like I'd basically lost one of my main passions, and then I'd managed to find something very, very similar. And that's kind of what, that's kind of what I fell in love with, I guess. It kind of replaced the void that I'd lost.
Yeah, I get that. I was a gymnast from a very young age, a gymnast and a dancer. And I probably stopped when I was about 14. And I never found that kind of love for another sport until I found bodybuilding. And like you say, I almost feel like the stage is like the performance aspect.
No, exactly, 100%. Like you get to show off a little bit, and I'm normally quite shy, but as soon as you put me on stage, like, I will literally come out as like some sassy alter ego queen thing, and it's like a completely different person. But if you were to meet me like in the street, you'd be like, no, wouldn't see it at all.
I'm exactly the same. I always think it's like an act.
Yeah, it 100% is. You're literally like, who can be the biggest sass queen on stage? Who can be the biggest diva? And it works. It pays off. But yeah, you just have to fake it till you make it, I think, on stage. Definitely.
And how did you find transitioning into your first off season?
I found it okay, actually. One thing I've always found, I got uncomfortable towards the end with body weight and things. But I think every bikini girl does, just because you're so far off your stage weight. But for me, it's never, even though I'd seen myself lean, I was also very aware that at that point I didn't want to be ill anymore. And I was very much like, I'm going to cut ties with the eating disorder. And that's kind of what I'd done. So I didn't really have this underlying desire to feel lean anymore. It was more the aspect of control. So for me, I like being in control of things I can control. So when I got ill, it was very much the food and exercise. I could control it. It wasn't necessarily at first something in order to get skinny. It was, I wanted control. And then I realized I could lose weight from it. So for me to be in off season, even though I saw my weight go up, I was still very much in control of what I was eating and what I was doing. And I had Josh obviously telling me what to do. And that very much like put me at ease. Like, obviously I had my bad days, and I had my days where I was like, Josh, I was like, do not put my food up. I want to compete again, like now. But in general, I wasn't massively panicking. And I actually really enjoyed it. Like, I managed to go away and things. But I would say my first off season, I still did struggle a little bit, just with like, I think you do panic. Like I said, I'm very much in control, and it carried on throughout all my off seasons, really. I was very, very robotic, even in off season. And I've never really hidden from that either. Like in prep, I was stupidly robotic. Like, I wouldn't even have ketchup, would keep my veg the same, would weigh my lettuce to the 0.5 gram, like stupidly robotic. And even Josh was like, Antonia, that's extreme. Yeah. And I kind of knew it. But to me, I was like, if I'm doing this, there's nothing else I could physically do in order to win. But I did carry on those things in off season, when realistically, like, I'd had ketchup and I didn't really weigh my veg much, but I could have been a lot more relaxed than I was. And in hindsight, that's something I clocked onto. But at the time, I was very much like, competing was such a big thing for me, and it definitely helped with my recovery. But I basically threw my all into it, and it did take over a fair bit as well. Yeah,
I think when you thrive off of that structure and routine, it's quite hard to then break away from it.
No, 100%. I said, like, it was so beneficial in some ways, but at the same time, it did, like, in hindsight, I look back and I'm like, wow, there's still a few, I didn't miss out on massive things, but there were still some things where, say if I got asked out by friends for the Friday, and then they asked me out on the Wednesday as well, I'd be a bit like, oh, like, that's 2 meals off, and I'd rather just have the one. And to me, that's when now I look back at it, I'm like, God, that was really stupid. But at the time I was like, I only want the 1 meal off a week. So I'd say like I did struggle in some ways, but not really with weight gain. It was more, I said, the control aspect that I wanted to be seen to be doing, and I wanted to know that I'd put everything into it. And I take things very, very literally as well. So if Josh were to say like, oh, like have like 1 meal off a week, he'd probably be fine with me having like a couple of meals off a week if need be, like if I was out and being sociable. But to me, if someone's like, have 1 meal off a week, I'll be like, I'm having 1 meal off a week and that's it.
I completely relate to that. I struggled at the beginning of this year with kind of striking the balance between having a social life and then feeling like I was putting enough into my off season to be successful. So I would do the same, that I would take it very literally. So it's 1 meal off a week, and you've got to be on your plan all the other times, and I'd be turning
really
down.
It's hard to find balance as a competitor, just purely because it's like I don't really like care for what other people think. Like sometimes I do, but it's more people will make comments, and it's people who don't really get it. So if you're seen to be eating out, if you have a pizza, I would have comments of people like, I didn't know you could eat that. Should you be eating that? And it's little things like that. And it's really difficult to like strike a balance when you've got people who aren't really in the know, who don't really get it. I think like people seem to think that if you compete, you need to be robotic, and you really don't. You really, really don't at all, for definite. And that's definitely something that I've realized in hindsight. But at the time, obviously, you kind of have your blinkers on and you're a bit like, whoa.
Yeah, it's kind of knowing how much you need to do, but then also how to still have a life at the same time.
No, exactly. And like I managed it a little bit in my off season last year, but it's only been like these past like, oh gosh, we're in September now, so like 8.5, 9 months that I've kind of really like, well, since I finished competing, to be honest, that I've kind of really established balance, but I've had to become unbalanced to then refine balance, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and what your balance is.
Yeah, I think everyone's idea of balance is so different as well. Like your balance isn't going to be the same to someone else's, and it's all like trying to find it where it fits in with your social life, your work life, everything else life. It's really quite hard. So I think when people preach balance, it's a bit like, well, what the hell is it?
Yeah, because it is so.
It's literally like just a random thing that people speak about and preach about, but sometimes it's not quite as easy as that.
No, it's more in terms of what you think is acceptable for your lifestyle rather than balance.
Yeah, I think it's just whatever makes you happy.
Yeah.
For definite. So I think people definitely overthink it, and I think as well you might find balance at one point in your life. So for me at the time competing, the balance I sort of had then fitted me quite well because I was threw myself into competing. Competing was everything I wanted and my work, but they tied in together and it was perfect. Whereas I could not do that now. I couldn't be as strict now, and I'd say I've probably found a pretty good balance. I mean, I have up and downs, but realistically, considering circumstances with coronavirus and all that jazz, balance is like somewhat there. But yeah.
So you did your first year with UK BFF, and then you come back with PCA. Did you stay with PCA in your second year?
I competed with PCA throughout my whole second year. So did I do 3 shows with them? Yeah, I did 3 shows with PCA that year. And then I was contemplating going to an IFBB show 2 weeks later, but we decided it just wasn't really worth it. It was just a lot of stress. It was a show in Italy, I think. And it was a bit of a last minute win where we were like, oh, should we do it? And it was like 2 weeks to go. And we were like, by the time we were looking into it, was like all the hotels were booked, all the Airbnbs were booked, like flights were a nightmare. Everything was in a foreign language. And we were like, it's probably best if we just call the season a quits now.
Yeah. And then the following year, you threw yourself into IFBB, didn't you?
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
And what shows did you get you?
I think I did 4 shows. That was like my most shows. And it would have been less than that, I think. But they rolled out that qualifier thing where you have to do a qualifier in order to do other shows. So that's why I ended up doing 4. I think originally we were going to do 2. And then it went to 3 because of the qualifier. And then we did the Amateur Olympia in the UK just because it was in the UK and I'd done one in Italy 2 weeks before. And we're like, you know what? I've done so well in Italy. It makes sense to just do, like give the Amateur Olympia a go and just kind of go out in the UK. And that was kind of what we did. And then that was, unbeknown to me and I think everyone else, that was my last show.
Because I can kind of remember watching last year and kind of it seemed like you were on a roll, so it was a bit of a shock when you said you were not competing anymore from someone who's kind of you know, kind of only seeing rare things on social media. So what was the point where you decided that you weren't going to compete anymore?
So there's a few things, to be honest with you. So in January, so basically literally right at the beginning of this year, I basically moved halfway across the country. So I moved up to Manchester. So I'm originally from the Midlands. And it was a pretty big move in that I've been self-employed now for 3.5 years, but for 3 years I'd been based in one gym, and I had my clients there, I had my work there, and it was very much a case of I'm literally leaving everything I know to restart a self-employed business in Manchester, well, up in Cheshire. And I'm now living by myself in a flat. So it's very much like I had a lot to go on. I was like, I need to reestablish my client base. I need to get, like, I was living at home, so I'd saved up money back home, but I was now I'm paying rent, I'm paying bills. I was like, I want to get a social life. So it was a combination. So I was kind of like, I'm just going to leave this year for competing and really focus on work. And like getting a bit more of a life and have an off season, but take a bit longer. And also obviously competing does cause a bit of havoc with your hormones and all that jazz. And I'm only young. So I was like, I'm 22 now. So I was like, if I take a year out, I'd still be a junior, really. And it would actually probably do me the world of good for physique, because I've done 3 seasons on the trot. So I was like, actually a year out will probably do me the world of good. So that was my original plan when I moved. And then in January, literally a couple of, like, I think it was a week or 2 in, I basically speak to clients about their main reason for why they want to achieve, or like their results, or why they do certain things a certain way, or why they come and see me. And normally it bottles down to something a lot bigger than like they just want to look lean. Like normally it's because they don't feel they're good enough as a person, or they feel they need validation because if they lose weight, that sort of thing. So it normally gets pretty deep, and normally my clients get pretty emotional about it. And I thought, for me, I need to go through it again. So I sat down with someone and was like, right, we're going to go through it again, because for me, it's really, really important that I can open up to clients as well as they open up to me. And I basically kind of just had a bit of an epiphany and was like, I've not really lived, so to speak. So obviously I was just before I turned 22, so I was 21. I was like, my whole life from the age of 12 has been consumed by food and exercise. I was like, it's not like competing was the best thing ever. Absolutely loved every single moment of it. And it's made me who I am now, and it made me recover. But at the same time, I realized I didn't want to be doing it anymore. And I realized that what I was doing was so robotic that I wasn't really living a normal life. So I kind of said to myself, I'm just not going to be a robot. I'm going to stop weighing my veg. I'm going to stop weighing my ketchup. And I'm going to stop being so overly strict with meal prep. And just focus on having a bit of a life and enjoying things. And that's kind of literally what I did. It literally just, the switch just went. And from that moment, I was like, I can't see myself ever competing again. And that was back in January. So I kind of told like 1 or 2 people who were really close to me, but I didn't put it on social media, because I was like, if I change my mind, I'll feel really bad. But also I was like, it just kind of takes the pressure off me a little bit, and I can just do my own thing and just focus on whatever it is I'm doing without, I don't know, just without people kind of like asking questions, I guess. And if someone asked me, I was like, oh, I'm just taking this year off. And then I'll see where I go from there. But yeah, I said it's a decision that came to me like that, and I've just stuck with it, and I can't see myself ever changing it, really.
And was it quite an easy transition, because it was kind of a gradual thought process? It wasn't like right, I'm stopping now.
It's, to be honest, the decision sort of was. I said it literally just came to me. I sat down, I was like, I'm just not going to compete again. And like I was saying it, so I think I sent it to my friend, and she was like, what? I was like, no. I was like, it's not going to happen. And it was really bizarre. But because I'd moved, everything was so new anyway. And I'd got so used to being a routine with work that I'd be in the gym certain hours. I knew exactly where I was going to be. So I had like meal prep times in the day. Like I wouldn't bulk cook. I was really weird with bulk cooking, so that if I wouldn't cook like 400 grams of chicken and then spread it between 4, I'd have to cook each 100 grams individually. God knows. So I was like, that's going to go. I'll start bulk cooking meals. I'll start like bulk cooking things. And it kind of just snowballed. And my mum came to stay with me like 2 weeks after I'd made this decision. And she was like, you're like a completely different person. Because she always jokes, I don't have OCD, but people always joke that I've got like OCD style tendencies, where I was like matching Tupperware, like everything was individually weighed, like everything was like really, really, really like over the top. And my mum was like, you're like, they've all gone. She was like, they're not just there. Like, where are they? And they've kind of just stuck. So I think moving has probably done me the world of good, because it kind of made me get out of the routine I was in and some of the negative like things I was doing. And yeah, it's sort of just stuck from there, thankfully. But yeah.
And what was the response like when you posted that you were coming away from competing? Were people shocked?
I think some people were, because I said I've not really mentioned it to everyone, but at the same time, like I kind of keep a lot of things I go through off social media, just purely because it's just something, I don't know, like I try not to like vent too much, but like I've been having I had quite a bad injury, and it's been like, it kind of came to light last January. So I went my whole prep last year with this injury, and I've basically been misdiagnosed quite a few times, and we finally started getting to the bottom of it at the beginning of this year, and it basically turns out I've got a tear in my hip. It's not awful, like my leg's not going to fall off, but it's never going to get any better because we think it's been there for about like 10 to 12 years. Right. So like I've had an injection on that, so it basically meant in lockdown I had this injection, and I basically had to take a complete backseat away from training, and realistically it's probably the best thing I've ever done. I've never really taken a long out of training, so my muscle has gone. I've actually lost weight over lockdown, weirdly, but like I have put some body fat on. I'm not as like muscular as I was, and I'm not as like full as well, but my hormones are sort of like back to normal. I actually feel healthy, and I've got a bit more of a life. Like I'll go out and have a few drinks, I'll go out for dinner with my partner, and like we are very like, I'm a very, very like normal person compared to what I was. I still eat out of Tupperware at work, and I still train really, really hard now, but I think lockdown made me sort of completely chill out, and that whole taking a step back, and I felt very unbalanced for me, taking that step back from training. I was on really, really strong painkillers and anti-inflammatories as well, so I basically completely lost my appetite. So I was basically having to like force feed like food that was easy to eat so that I wouldn't just like diminish to nothing. So I think the whole feeling out of control then made me realize that I don't need to be as in control as I was, and that there is very much like I can find a balance, and that's sort of like what I've managed to do. So yeah, essentially that's sort of how it kind of came to light. But yeah, I think people were shocked, but the people that were close to me were like, it's probably the best thing for you, because you're actually now living a bit more of like a life that you've probably needed to have lived for the past 10 years, and in fact like you just haven't. So yeah, I don't know, like some people messaged me, but it wasn't, to those closest to me, it wasn't a massive shock, no.
And I kind of think that their opinions in a way are irrelevant, because it does sound like you're in a really good place now.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, lockdown was hard, don't get me wrong. Like, it's definitely challenged me. So like I moved halfway across the country. I built my client base up to a reasonable level for 3 months, and then we hit lockdown, and I was like, great. Yeah. So I'm now like having to rebuild my business again for the second time this year. And stuff, but I was like, I'm still here, I'm still in the north, I've not sold my flat, I've not killed my boyfriend, and I now have a dog, so realistically we're off to a good start. And yeah, I'm able to train again, albeit there's some exercises I can't do, but I'm actually able to train heavy, and I am sticking to like a nutrition plan that I sort of just write myself, and I kind of know what I'm doing, so that I don't really need a coach. I have one of my friends overlooking it for me, but so I just tend to stick to like macros during the week, because I'm sure you're aware as well, like if you're really, really busy, the last thing you want to be doing is like not prepping food, because you end up being like, I've not eaten anything all day. Yeah. So yeah, I meal prep a lot. Like my fridge is like meal prep central, because it's got mine and my partner's food in it as well. But yeah, like I said, it's very much like it's meal prep mostly during the week, cook dinners if I'm back, and then food out on the weekend. And it's just, yeah.
It's kind of nice, isn't it, knowing that the meals are there, and like you say, when you're busy, you just eat what's available, but also having that kind of mindset that if someone asks you out for dinner, it's fine. Like,
yeah, I think that's the bit I've definitely missed out on. I think summer made me really realize that I live in a really, really sociable building. It's like a brand new building for like young professionals, so we've got a rooftop. So in the in lockdown, when it was really hot, we were up sunbathing, and we'd have like drinks up there in the evenings. And I remember I sat there one evening, and I was just like, wow, I'm 22, and this is the first time in my whole life that I've sat and had a few drinks without, obviously the past few years in the summer I've competed, so drinking in the sun wasn't really an option. But then before that I was ridden with an eating disorder, so if I did drink, it's because I hadn't eaten anything all week, and then I'd just try and not eat anything the week after because I drank. So it was basically this, like, it wasn't really binging, but like it was like restrict and then have a bit of a free for all, get pretty pissed because I hadn't eaten anything, and then feel guilty, so then I'd starve myself again. So I've never really actually sat and enjoyed like drinks and being sociable, or like eating out in the sun and being sociable. And I was like, this is like the first time I was like, it's really weird, but it's really, really nice. So I was like, it's definitely been like a massive eye opener. But I'd say I've kind of started to find like what is a good balance for me, for definite. Yeah.
And I think being present in the moment and then social situations, because when you're on prep or you're kind of being quite strict, like you say, you start analysing things like that, like, oh, well, I can't have that, or I can't do this, or whereas, you know, you can.
Yeah, definitely. I think as well, there's a massive thing where on social media, it's almost like some people don't get into it, but I think I definitely did, where I wanted to be seen as doing everything physically possible, and I wanted to be the hardest worker. I wanted to tell myself that I could be the hardest worker. And I think it's really difficult when you see people being very, very robotic to then not be quite as robotic, because you feel like you're not doing enough, when actually like it's really not the case. I think sometimes the more chilled out you are, the better you're going to do, just because you're putting a lot less pressure on yourself, you're a lot less stressed, you're a lot like, you can just chill. But like it is really, really, really hard. And I think as well, as females, we definitely take things a lot more to heart, and a lot more, I don't know what it is, but I've definitely noticed as a female, like I'm definitely a lot harder on myself when it comes to those sorts of things. And that's from like speaking to guys who obviously I know who compete, but I may be wrong.
I do think women are very self-critical.
Yeah, for definite. I said some guys will probably be just as bad as us, but I definitely think, like, I know for sure that I'm very much like very hard on myself. Like I'm my own worst critic and a half, for sure. But yeah, it is really, really tough. And I like social media obviously doesn't add to that, but then again at the same time, social media is also a massive blessing. So it's like trying to find the fine line.
Yeah, because you've got that great community, but at the same time, you've also got the opportunity for, like you say, comparison and feeling like you're not doing as much as someone else.
No, 100%. I think it's always hard as well when you first get into competing to compare yourself to those who have been doing it a while, or those who are who are assisted, if you're unassisted, that sort of thing. And I think age is a massive thing as well. Like I know when I was doing PCA and even IFBB, PCA I did all as juniors because obviously you can't do both in the same show. But IFBB, I competed as a junior in one show and in open class. And obviously for me, I was very much comparing myself to girls who are like 5 or 6 years older than me. And they've got like a hell of a lot more muscle and muscle maturity than I do. And in hindsight, I'm like, God, Antonia, why are you looking at like 30-year-olds Instagram accounts who have basically probably been training way longer than you? They've got more muscle than you. They've got more muscle maturity than you. And like, but at the time you just don't see it. And I think especially when you've got your prep blinkers on, it's just very much like you just focus on you, but it's very, very difficult to get like just focus on you when you can see people doing other things or looking certain ways or doing certain shows, and you'll be like, am I up against them? Like, are they going to be like in like my show? Like, oh my gosh, they look amazing. Oh my gosh, they're really lean for like 3 weeks out, and I'm like not that lean. It's things like that, but at the same time, you very much do have to focus on you. And I did learn that towards the end, that I was just very much like, right, just me. That's it. That's all that matters. But yeah, for sure, like it is hard. Social media is difficult.
Yeah, it is. It's really hard to navigate and find kind of a happy medium.
Oh, 100%. 100%. Yeah, I definitely agree. Like social media is just sometimes can be it's difficult. I've started like posting like non-bodybuilding photos as much as possible. I went through like a week where I posted loads, so I was like, I just want to put just, like the bodybuilding stuff like further down. I don't like it, but like whenever I meet people now, like I don't ever really say I've competed. It's only when people have like seen and they'll be like, oh, like, I didn't realize you compete, or they'll ask me about competing, but I'll never be like, oh right, yeah, I'm an ex-bikini girl, got some trophies. wore some sparkly bikinis, look like an Oompa Loompa. Like, it's just not something I do.
No, and also I think it becomes a big part of your identity when you're a competitor, and it's almost all you talk about. So I
Yeah.
actually get really excited when I have a conversation where it's not about competing, because there's so
Oh yeah, sure. I think as well, when you meet people or you speak to people who aren't involved in it, they're fascinated by it, as would we be if we met like someone who was doing something else. But to them, they don't understand it, and all they want to do is talk about it and find out all about it, and like what you eat and what you do, and if you only eat protein, and if how you can eat Cocoa Pops, and how many cheat meals you have, and what calorie, like everything like that. Like, they want to know it all. And obviously, if you live and breathe it, sometimes you're just a bit like,
oh, here we go again.
something that's not to do with competing, or like they'll ask you for fitness advice and stuff. And obviously, I'm always down for giving people advice, but it's quite nice that people now don't see me as just a competitor. Like, I'll speak to people about competing occasionally in fitness, because like personal training is my job, but I don't feel it defines me anymore. Whereas before, I was very much like, well, all I do is compete and work. So like, basically, I'm just this fitness person because I'm a personal trainer, and then I wear a sparkly bikini, and that's about it. So at least I've got a little bit more going for me now, for sure. And I have a cute dog, so that makes up for it, I guess. But
It's
yeah.
interesting because I didn't start competing until I was 25, so I had a bit of a different experience that I found kind of, I got out of touch with fitness and then come back to it, but I had travelled, I had kind of partied, I had that social life already, so I've never felt that I've missed that because I'd already done it. So it's quite a different viewpoint for me. What would your advice be for someone who's kind of 17, 18 and is looking at competing?
I think take your time, for definite. As in, I don't feel I've ever missed out on anything, because competing for me was a massive turning point in terms of it made me get my life together.
Yeah.
And at the time, my life was not together. So even though I was going out and drinking, like, it wasn't enjoyable, but I said that's what has made me me. But I think if you are that age, like, do your research. If you want to compete that badly, like, wait till you've got enough muscle. Like, the stage is always going to be there, no matter what.
Yeah.
And I think you definitely need to make sure, like, you know what you're getting yourself in for in terms of hormones, and things like that, because the standard is getting higher. Girls are getting leaner, and it's hard. It really is. And I don't think people realize sometimes how difficult competing can be in terms of how much stress it puts on your body. And if you're like 17, 18 and you're at school or you're at uni, it's added pressure. Like, I didn't go to uni, I went straight into work. I sacked uni off. I took a gap year and just never went because I fell in love with personal training. But it is really hard to like juggle everything at once. And I do think, like, sometimes, like, I don't think I've missed out, because for me it was a life I wanted to live.
Yeah.
And now I've seen the end of it, but I can very much see how some people could miss out on what could be like their sort of sociable years and their partying and all that jazz, and they won't necessarily get it back. Whereas, so I definitely think, like, take your time, like, really know if you want to do it, because I think as well there's a lot of pressure on people thinking that in order to be like fitness, good on Instagram, get a decent following, whatever it may be, or like, I don't know, or like have a good body, that they need to compete. And it's really not the case. Like, you can be involved in fitness as much as a competitor, and you can be as into the gym and as into your food prep and all that jazz, but you just don't have to step on stage. Like, you don't have to get stupidly lean. That being said, like, there's nothing, I've never don't have to say anything against competing, but I think it's definitely one of those things you need to think about, like, whether you want to compete for you or whether you're wanting to compete for a certain image. But so I think as long as people do their research, it's just one of those. I think everyone kind of has to find out whether they love competing themselves. You can't really tell someone whether or not they're going to enjoy it. It's very much like, if you do it, you love it, or you don't.
Yeah, and just kind of owning your decision. So if you don't enjoy it, that's fine. It's not for you. But like you said, I've never felt like I've sacrificed anything because I love it.
For sure. I said, like, people used to say to me, like, don't you feel like you're sacrificing, like, going out on nights out? And at the time I was like, no, like, this is what I want to do. And now it's not something I want to do. So I can do the things that I now want to do. And I don't feel I'm sacrificing competing. So I think it's very much like everyone goes through their, like, how, like, their journey differently. So like, I never know, I might go back to competing like 10 years time. I highly doubt it, but like 4 years ago, I wasn't ready to be that social party animal that went out and did things. I wanted to knuckle down with my work and competing, and that was me. And I was very happy doing that. Whereas like now it's work and social life, and still just like keep up the fitness without like getting really, really lean. So yeah, I think for definite, like I don't regret anything, but it's, you just run through your phases of life in like sometimes just different orders, I guess.
Yeah, we're all entitled to change our minds and change
Yeah,
paths.
definitely for sure. Yeah, I said I can't see myself ever doing it now, but I absolutely loved every second. There's not a single thing I would change. No.
Good. It's so nice to hear someone who's actually come away from it and is really positive about it, because you can hear some people come away from it and they do feel like they've sacrificed, or
Yeah.
It's been a negative experience. So it's nice to hear someone who's taken what they need to take from it and then moved on because that's the right decision for them.
Yeah, for definite. I think it's very much like what you make of it. If you think of it in a negative way, like I could look back at the times where I was like, I'm so cold, I kind of like can't feel my fingers, my toes, or my nipples, and I don't really want to walk on this treadmill anymore because I'm so tired. But like that's something I wanted to do at the time. And like the people you meet through competing, like the experience I've had, I've managed to travel with it. I've won some really cool trophies. Like everything else is so positive, like it outweighs those low moments in prep. And I said, I always told myself, if there's ever a day where like I can feel like an eating disorder of some sort, like I start hating myself and not wanting to put weight on, or if I find I don't love the sport anymore, I was like, that is the day. I call it a day, and that's it. And that's kind of literally just what I did. Yeah, I said I will never ever speak badly on competing. It's just no longer for me. And I think a lot of people will probably, I think everyone's going to come to that point in their life when it comes to competing. It's just whether you hit it when you're my age and basically be a very, very young retiree, or whether you hit it when you're like 45. It's like completely different.
Yeah. And one last question before I leave you. I think that competing teaches you a lot of things that you can transfer to all aspects of your life. What have you learned through competing?
Oh gosh. All sorts, to be honest. I think that's due to my age though. I've kind of like learned everything about life. Definitely, I think how strong I am as a person, for definite. I think I was speaking about it a couple of days ago with my mum. Like she is amazed that I'm still living up here by myself and I've now got a dog. Just because obviously lockdown hit, and I'm like, I live alone in a flat and I've got no family up here. I've got friends, but obviously lockdown, you're by yourself, and it's things like that. And it's now I'm back at work, it's made me realize that actually I've done so well to still be on my feet up here, still being able to like sort myself out, and actually I'm in a lot better place mentally than I was at the beginning of the year. So I think competing has definitely taught me a lot about myself and like how strong I am and how motivated I am, and just like I guess like how much of a positive outlook I try and have on things, because this year could very much have like made me completely lose my head and fall backwards in terms of like a mental health perspective. So I think mentally I'm definitely a lot stronger from competing, because you kind of push through those days where you're like, ugh, don't want to do this. So I'd say like it's just like the mental perseverance and determination and just like the confidence to be able to do that, I guess. But I've learned a lot in the past couple of years, definitely through competing. So I could literally name a list of things I've learned. So I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, it definitely teaches you resilience.
Yeah. Oh no, 100%, 100%. Yeah, those days I didn't want to go on the cross train or the stairmaster. Yeah.
Yeah, and that transfers to everything, doesn't it? Like your career and your relationships and everything.
Yeah. Oh no, 100%. It definitely does. I think it makes you grow as a person, provided you have a positive outlook on competing. I said I very much think competing is very much what you make of it. If you think of all the negatives, you're going to have a very negative outlook on competing, and you won't take much away from it. Whereas if you think of how much of a positive thing it's brought to you, and all the positive outsets and all the things that's good about it, it will definitely like benefit your life, and everyone who's in your life, for sure.
It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. I've absolutely loved listening to your story and
Thank you.
out about what you're up to now. If people want to continue to follow your journey and what you're up to, where can they find you?
So I'm mainly on Instagram, so it's Antonia.Mander. I've also got a work one, which is Antonia.ManderPT, but I'm yet to post anything on that one. So that one's like a bit of a, I need to start, I've only just set it up. But yeah, Antonia.Mander is my main one, where I kind of post occasional like fitness things, but it's mainly like my puppy or baking, or my boyfriend, and what I go out and eat with him. But yeah, I said mainly it's that one. So yeah, I think that, yeah, it's just that one, just Instagram.
Perfect, and I will tag that in the show notes.
Thank you.
Thanks guys for tuning in, and if you've got any questions for myself or Antonia, please just drop me a DM. I'm on Instagram at parttimebodybuilder or holly.lj.
Thank you so much for having me.